Good afternoon, all. On behalf of SICI and SVCE, we welcome all the speakers, the three speakers, and the participants to today's event on PEAK, a program for engineers' advanced knowledge, virtual industry academia series to enlighten the workforce in engineering and technology. So today is our second session that we are doing on AI. And before going into the session, I'd like to just introduce about the chamber. Southern India Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It is the 111-year-old industry body where we connect the industry, government, and the academia. We add value with the 25 sectoral committees, around 25 sectoral committees that we have, starting from agriculture, food processing, manufacturing, entrepreneurship, innovation, startup committee, the electronic vehicle, aerospace and defense, economic affairs, etc. The major role that we have, we come up with knowledge reports, surveys, also we come up with the recent or response set up in Chennai Central Metro Railway Station, a center of excellence for EV, for electronic vehicle, an industry 4.0 that we are going to start at the southern part of Tamil Nadu, startup exchange that we are planning, and a center of excellence for fintech that we are planning at the Anna University. So these are some of the projects that from SICI we are doing now. And as part this today's session is part of our employability committee, which is very dynamic and which is chaired by our moderator, Mr. George Koshi. So before going into the session, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Mr. George Koshi. Is the Director, Learning and Development at SIFI Technologies Limited. And he's a leadership coach and has over 25 years of experience as a learning specialist in domain ranging from manufacturing, assessment centers, consulting, and information technology. So previously he has worked with Kavin Care, Infosys, Servion Global Solutions, Hyundai Motors Limited. So he is currently heading the learning and development function of SICI, an information communication technology company it is. And we also have two great people, actually the two speakers we have. One is Mr. Gopi Kotishwaran. He is one of the board member of SICI. He also chairs the SICI Entrepreneurship Innovation Startup Committee, and he is an alumnus of IITM, IIMC, and Harvard University. So he is a CEO of Disruptive.ai, and he was a former CEO of Latent View Analytics, the former co-founder and partner. He's a co-founder and partner of Cardiac Wellness Institute. He's a former CEO, Direct Life Philips, Netherlands, and also he has worked as a business director at Johnson & Johnson, Netherlands. He's also associated with Stanford Seed, chair in TIE Deep Tech, and an advisor at Robert Bosch Center, IITM. And we also have another speaker, Mr. A.S. Ramana Prasad. He's the chairman of Meritus AI Learning Experiences Private Limited. So he has a degree from IIT Madras and 2 MS degree in engineering from University of Cincinnati, USA. He started his career with Intel in California, and he is on the governing council of Center for Innovation, IITM, and is a mentor for Change Atal Tinkering Lab, Niti Aayog Government of India, and also governing council of International Cartobat Foundation. He's also the executive committee member of PAN IIT and on the board Department of Engineering Design IIT Madras. So he has both our speakers, they have a vast experience in the field, and I hand over the session to Mr. George Koshi, moderator, to take over the session further.
Okay, thank you, William. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I would like to thank the Southern SICI, the Southern Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, and also Venkateshwara Engineering College for partnering and providing these insights for our students and the academic community. In fact, like William said, we are in for a treat here because we have two stalwarts, probably a couple of them who would double up as an army by itself in terms of knowledge when it comes to a topic like that we are talking today, which is artificial intelligence. I have done a few in the past, like with respect to webinars like this. I mean, in fact, the last one on this series was the 3D printing, and I'm sure that many of the students probably got benefited out of this, and possibly this one again on artificial intelligence. And I'm sure that all the students who are gathered here and the faculty members as well. I'm sure that some of them would be industrialists. I'm sure that many roles and the people will be here. So I'm sure that it would benefit all of them. And so I would like to set the context here in terms of the artificial intelligence, the topic on artificial intelligence. From childhood, I've been kind of amazed and awed by the technology that has come. I'm sure the advances of these technologies these days. Probably you talk about when Alexa came in, like Google Assistant, Siri, and all such virtual assistants came in. A lot of things, and movies, sci-fi movies like Terminator and Transformer, where machines are like behaving like human beings. So all these things are like very closely probably we can talk about artificial intelligence here. And even when you take about industries, like digital transformation in organization is being the buzzword these days. And the objective of most of the CEOs and CTOs is to actually move or transform digitally. And we talk about digital leadership and things like that as well. Leaders are known by the decisions they make. And I'm sure that data analytics generally help in those decisions. So some of the questions like, does AI help in those analytics? And we can talk a lot, and I'm sure that I'm not going to talk about all these things. In fact, since I am going to wanted to do a panel discussion, I did some homework on AI as well. So let's jump and ask the first question, and I generally make it an open question, so each of the panel members can take 3 to 4 minutes and respond to that. So my first question is, say I have seen AI being loosely used. I've seen AI-powered camera, AI-powered devices. I don't know if they are all AI-powered. So what is actually artificial intelligence, and why is it being spoken so much these days? And that's the first question, open to both the panel members. Anybody can take the opportunity and start.
So maybe I'll be the first to go. I hope he doesn't mind it.
Yes,
please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of this question from a very different perspective, to bring context to this question. So, like many years ago, maybe, like one of the things in physics we talked about is simple machines. Simple machines helped us do physical work very easily by using levers, inclined planes, pulleys, and a whole bunch of first order, second order, etc., etc. So they were mostly mechanical in nature and were able to reduce human physical requirements significantly. They were very smart in moving. We talk about the pyramids moving these large blocks of stones on an inclined plane and be able to put it up. So these were some of the examples. Now, cut to the to the current situation. Artificial intelligence to me is a branch of computer science which helps replicate human intelligence, but is able to make decisions with a large amount of data much faster and probably much better. So, will it replace human beings? I'm jumping the gun. I don't think so. There are areas where the drudgery of work can be reduced, like in the olden days, what we did with using crowbar or some of these levers can be done better by machines. So artificial intelligence is a branch of computer science to me, which takes large amount of data, puts it together, and then presents it for making better decisions or better quality of decisions. So this is my first cut view. I'll leave it to Gopi.
No,
He's
thanks,
more
Ramna.
hands-on and he's a better expert on this.
No, thank you.
So
Appreciate it.
another part of that question is, why is it being spoken so much these days, Ramna?
So I think that the main reason is it's becoming part of life. This is something which we have seen, where technology creeps into our life without our knowledge. And suddenly one day you realize, my God, you're just surrounded by all the things. So people have begun to realize that AI and data science are very important pieces of the technology. And it's better that we start learning it. So it has become a buzzword. But of course, as usual with all buzzwords, there are a lot of people who just do a tick mark to it and then say, yeah, I also do AI, or I, like as you rightly put it, AI powered cameras, AI, maybe I'm sure there's a definition for what is AI and what is not AI, right? So I'm sure, there is definition. So we have to, remove the shaft and just take what is the relevance to the whole thing, the relevant.
Got it.
Thank you.
To George, if
Yeah,
I
go
may
ahead, go ahead.
say, just to build on what Ramana was saying, it's difficult to see a startup pitch today that doesn't have AI in it, right? It's just impossible. So somebody just adds AI either in the very first slide or in the last slide as an afterthought, because AI has now become such an interesting part of this whole package of excitement and so on. It's important for us to focus on what is it actually, right? And to build on what Ramana said, I think the term artificial intelligence was first coined way back in 1956, right? So by John McCarthy in a Dartmouth conference. And it's a very computer science thing. And the idea was, can machines mimic the behavior of human beings? That's kind of at a broad level. And George, what you mentioned about the sci-fi movies, obviously it's you get mass audience if you're able to show the extreme end of what AI can do. And as Ramana started when he said, some of those things are not feasible today, but they're still in progress. But the area where AI is being used tremendously today is, I'll give you some simple examples of use. If you do a Google search, it tells you what exactly you're looking for, and that's AI, right? So it is intelligently figuring out. Similarly, if I look at my Facebook feed, it's only showing me things that I'm interested in. And this is AI in action right now. Or if you even speak to a Siri and it responds to you in a reasonably intelligent way. So even 10 years ago, all these would have been fairly challenging. And even facial recognition, right? Simple things like your phone recognizing you, and if you put on your sunglasses, it still recognizes you. Sometimes even with your mask, it recognizes you. So these are all fair advancements that have happened. Why is it more prevalent today is, I think there are two big drivers. One is the computing power has gone up significantly. The computing power is just shot through the roof. So what are, just before the call, Ramana was sharing that he was one of the original team members in Intel in the early 80s when 8086 was being developed, right? So, and at that time, the computing power would have been very minimal. But today, our phones have fairly significant computing power. And the amount of data has gone through the roof, right? So you need this level of data. So for a phone to recognize our face, it should have seen so many faces and it should have had so many algorithms behind it. It should have done all of these things for it to instantly recognize it. So those are a couple of things where the computing power and the amount of volume of data shooting through have ended the AI winter, as it's called. For a long time after AI was termed, nobody was interested in listening to AI specialists. The computer science folks who were doing neural networks were not that hot. But today, obviously, the employability chair is asking us to come and talk about AI, which basically means it's a hot field. Students want to join that place and it's developing. So in a sense, although AI has been in existence for a long time, and there's various ranges of AIs, from the movie stuff to day-to-day things that we use. And but today it's prevalent everywhere. And so we have to be, and AI also drops off. Once a technology we use so frequently, we get used to it and we cease to call it as some major AI, right? So once we get used to it, that thing drops off. The cutting edge continues to be the AI part that we will talk about. So it is an emerging field, and there are a lot being discovered in a 5-year time frame. We would have moved forward so fast that today's conversation we are having might not even be relevant 5 years or 10 years later. But as of today, here's kind of where we are. And the autonomous cars have also done their pieces to make it very exciting, because the human mind likes the idea of, I cannot imagine an autonomous car in India right now, but in a few years' time, if we see one driving better than us, then that will automatically, open our brains, and we will start looking at. So the excitement around AI currently is reasonable and fair. But we have to be cautious about where to use AI. If it's an AI-powered camera, then I would ask the question, what in the camera is AI-powered? Please explain it to me. So basics, nothing fancy. It's just we need to be using our common sense to identify what is AI and what is not AI, and not get carried away by the hype that's around it.
Hey, thank you, Gopi and Ramana. In fact, see, in these days of, like, you mentioned autonomous cars and robot-assisted surgeries that are happening, and you also mentioned that the artificial intelligence is a branch of computer science, and since computing power has increased a lot, and because of that, probably what was difficult earlier, it became quite easier now. And you also mentioned that today's technology can become obsolete, and similarly AI also, and it's very much an emerging field, and that's why we are talking about it these days. But then, since we have a large student community here, I just was thinking, like, my next question should focus on that. So what are some of the areas that students should focus in order to have a career in artificial intelligence? So it could be courses, it could be curriculums, it could be any other things as well. So what should students focus in order to have a career in artificial intelligence? That's the next question, and probably I'll direct to Ramana.
Okay, thank you. The most important thing, as what I feel, okay, this is from my point of view, is we must always focus on the fundamentals. So that means the students must learn computer science, which is the basis of everything. So they must have a very good understanding of computer science. How do you build simple programs, etc. Learning languages like Python or Kotlin or many of the other things, can happen in parallel. But learning the fundamentals of how, say, Gopi was talking about the processing power or the computing power going up so much and so fast. Today, a lot of people have started working in the field of the graphical processor units, GPUs, because the computing power required for AI and data science is becoming so huge. This can only be achieved by GPUs, which were being used mostly for showing videos. But I think now, GPUs have become the state of the art. So there is a field of people who can start working, who can study, the things of how to increase the computing power, which is what Gopi had talked about. Then I think so it is a combination of both hardware and software. And if you know the field of computer science, I think AI is, AI or deep learning or neural networks or machine learning or, data science, they're all, subsidiary sets of the same thing. And you can then start focusing on that. So I think, first is a good CS background, and then focusing on the field of, whichever interests the person. So, if they're interested in autonomous cars, they can work. They want to work in the field of healthcare, data science, all these things are used enormously. There are great technologies which is still waiting to be uncovered or developed. I see a great potential People are talking about $120 billion industry globally for just AI. And I think a lot of it is still not even discovered. So I see a huge potential. So students must have basic, and then they must have the passion to follow through in it. Of course, there will be failures. There will be points of time when they'll be irritated, but they must be able to overcome the bad times and look at the good times and then move forward. I see a great potential for or somebody says, no, I just want a career in the field of AI. I think there are going to be 10 million jobs available globally. So I think companies are desperately looking for AI practitioners, computer science practitioners, data science practitioners. So there is no dearth of job availability. So I see a great potential for this industry, but you must know where to focus. Would I want to focus on increasing the computing power, or do I want to focus on the software end, or do I want to understand both ends? So I think it's open-ended type of a question, and I see a great opportunity for students to to take this leap. I only wish I was much younger than what it was today. I would have probably gone back to learning all over again.
Okay, thanks, Ramana. In fact, so you were talking about focusing on the fundamentals in computer science and things like that. So probably this question I would like to direct to Gopi, because he's been in the industry as well. So just wanted to check, like, if you look at the industry academia gap, like in terms of like what students learn in colleges, would that be only enough to actually be employable? Because I know I'm quite selfish here, because I like to talk about employability here. So students passing out of computer science stream or any other streams like that, would the curriculum that is being taught in colleges, would that be only enough to actually get into an industry and probably work in fields like AI and machine learning and all those things? So that's my question to you.
Excellent. No, thanks, George. I think it's a fantastic question what you asked, and the answer is yes and no, because the honest answer is no, you're not ready. But then nobody is ready. So the industry will pick you up and provide you with the right kind of training to make sure you get to the right path, right levels of knowledge, so that you can contribute, right? Having said that, what's really important is going back to Ramana's point on fundamentals. One of the things that we always look for when we take in a new employee is how are they able to connect these algorithms, data science, computer science, the neural networks they've learned. Are they able to connect it with something in real life, right? Are they able to see the connections between these two, or are they seeing real life as something different from what I'm learning from school, right? And that it's important that these connections are made through your efforts, that you look at it and say, how can what I've learned be applied here? And this only comes if your fundamentals are strong, right? So, for instance, in a company like Latent View, if you join us, and we have, I should say this because one of our stalwarts, Mahadevan, he heads Europe plus East Coast delivery. He's a product of SVCE. So I have tremendous respect for SVCE students and also IIT Madras, the current director, Kamakoti, Professor Kamakoti, is a SVCE product, right? So we have, you guys have done well, and your school has stellar alumni, and I'm sure you will do a great job in the future. I have no concerns about it. Where I would want you to focus is on applications of this, because if you joined a company like Latent View, within a few months, you're going to be interacting with executives from Microsoft and the global leaders everywhere. And they are not going to check whether you've just come out of campus or you've been in the workforce for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. The only thing they know is what you interact with them. So if you're able to go to the Microsoft executive and tell them, hey, you can improve your Xbox experience by applying this technology in this fashion, they would take their hats off to you and say, they don't care whether you're 3 months out of campus or you've been in the workforce for 30 years. What they want is who's going to contribute. So your ability to connect real life with what you're learning is very important. And unfortunately, at least during my times, this was not done in a structural way in colleges. So I don't know how it is now. So you will have to, as individuals, take efforts, and as peer groups, as your friends, you should start having these conversations about, if you learn something new, then how could that potentially change the world in the coming years? And as Ramna was saying, there might be tens of thousands of jobs, but if you start your own company, if you identify a gap in the market, so you could be providing those jobs to others, right? So I would really emphasize on, in addition to the courses that you learn, in addition to the curriculum that you are exposed to, sharpen your mind on the critical thinking skills and figure out how each one of this will be applied in the real world. And there are no direct answers, but keep asking this question. Talk to your friends about it. Talk to your colleagues about it. Make sure you are super curious intellectually and you're asking these questions, because that's what industry is looking for. We want bright people who are asking tough questions and who can interact with senior executives globally, instantaneously and immediately. Right? Does that, in a way, answer your question, Josh?
Yes, that's too many skills that you put in the.
The only single skill that thing is that how does what I learn apply in the real world? And there are no answers to it. Your curiosity about asking this is what we look for. Not so much, you don't need to have answers. Nobody has answers, right? So, but are you asking these questions? Are you being curious? And that's something every industry person will look for, because we don't even know what problems you're going to have 2 years down the line, right? So we want curious, inquisitive employees joining us.
Fair enough. In fact, see what you said, if I could actually phrase it, the ability to provide human-centric applications, probably improving the experience of users and customers. And to do that, I think it is important to ask the right questions and consult with the right people. I think it's a combination of all these skills would actually help the students, is what I see. Probably if I put it in a different way, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Ramana, if you can just add to some of the things that probably Gopi had said, is there anything that you see?
Yeah. I'm just reminded of one story which I heard about a London-based entrepreneur who, before the eastern part of Europe had joined into the western part of Europe, and it had just, the economic problems had crossed. He approached all the hospitals which were having these mammograms, and took all of them, digitized it, and created a complete profile, along with all the reports. And he was able to create a beautiful software which was able to, an AI software which was able to then predict, based on the data which he has already, had in hand now, of how the future trends are going to happen, assuming they come from that particular European background. I'm not saying of a mixed background or coming from different parts of the world and settling down in Europe. So these type of innovative thinking is not even being done so far in India. I mean, if we just take southern part of India, we are not just one country, we are multiple set of people. But we can take all the data, and this can become a great tool to doctors to be able to do diagnosis much better. I'm just giving you one example. There are thousands of stories still to be discovered. So this is what I meant by, passion. I think we have to identify what the problem is and find the problem solving. The solution, what Gopi talked about, critical thinking, is exactly the same thing. So I see a great opportunity for students to, follow their passion, their leads. And if they do it, every field is, especially in this field, they'll do great. That's what I think.
Thank you, Ramana. In fact, curious students who've just joined in this panel discussion, I think, you can ask the questions. You can actually post your questions on the chat window as well, and William can share that with us. If there are any questions from your end, please do that. Can we give some time for them to actually ask some questions, or is it only through chat, William?
It can be through chat alone, sir.
All right. Oh, so then I will go ahead with my next thought. Probably taking a lead from what Ramana had just spoken. He gave an example. So my question, next question is like, what are some of the problems that we have that AI can solve? Probably if it is existing problems that AI can solve, and also futuristic problems that AI can solve. What are some of your take on that, or probably insights on that? Any one of you can respond on that.
I can probably jump in on one or two areas, and then
Yes.
in the field of healthcare, just building on what Ramana said, there are areas where globally some of these problems have still not been solved. One of it is like identifying Parkinson's early, right? That's or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's early. It can be done by looking at brain MRIs. And mostly there's a lot of work being done on Alzheimer's globally, but if I look at Parkinson's, which is probably more prevalent in India, there could be, so if you're able to look at the brain, enough brain MRIs and work with neurosurgeons and identify, come up with algorithms that can detect the disease early, there's a lot you can do, right? So that's why I'm giving you a very specific example. So there might be 10 other such fields that are there. And the cutting edge place where there's a big difference is these are kind of work that is usually done in startups in Israel, where they have a more cohesive ecosystem. They have access to all this data, and also they're applying their minds on cutting edge problems. And I want to encourage the students here to think slightly at the cutting edge, because some of the work that we do, people across the globe should get up and say, wow, did you guys do it from India? That's the kind of work we should be starting to push for. And I would say along those lines, if robotic surgery is picking up fairly well, and usually there's an element of advice to the surgeon that's given at the point what needs to be done and so on. So that's as cutting edge as it goes. Even in those areas, you can, so what you really need is lots of data. What is the problem that particular surgeon is facing, and how can I use AI to solve that problem that the surgeon is facing, right? As I'm just breaking it down into simple parts. So if you're committed to this cause and you sit, because the number of cases that we have in India would be, I'm sure, tenfolds or more than the cases most parts of the world face, right? So because the huge population, and some diseases might be very India-centric. So addressing those would be very possible, and they would also be cutting edge. It will be the first time such a problem is being solved globally. And so although India has developed fantastic companies like Infosys, Cognizant, etc., we still, over the next 5 to 10 years, need to develop these kind of things that the world looks up and says, wow, you guys, were the first ones to do this. So those are opportunities still available. And nobody's, maybe somebody's trying it, somebody in Stanford, somebody here in different parts of the world. But given that we have more number of cases, and we do have cutting edge medical experts, that's one area where an AI expert holding hands with the multidisciplinary team can still come up with breakthrough solutions the world has not seen, right? So I just wanted to make it as specific as possible. Obviously, there would be a lot more around this area, but that's one area which still lends itself for good work in the AI field.
So okay, like probably before I give the same question to Ramana, I was thinking that because when I did some kind of a research, I did some study on before joining this panel discussion, I just searched on what AI is, and I came to see that there are two types. One is general AI, and the other one is narrow AI, right? And the general AI is what Gopi spoke about, all the sci-fi movies and all those things which are quite futuristic, where robots speak like human beings and things like that. And narrow AI is more specific and can solve problems, right? I'm sure that, yesterday, I mean, even we actually discussed some time back, and you said it's quite aspirational as well. And Ramna also mentioned that, we are going there, we are reaching there, what he said. So let us talk about the narrow artificial intelligence and say, okay, what are some of the problems? You talked about healthcare, and even Ramna talked about healthcare. There are a lot of other fields like education, like manufacturing, a lot of other areas, industries. So what could be some other problems that AI can solve?
Let me try to answer it. It's a slightly more complex question. One of the things which we have seen is that, I mean, there are opportunities and there are problems to be solved in every sector, right? I mean, just look at cybersecurity. How many people lose money on a daily basis across India by scammers and by different methods? I see a great opportunity to be able to present to banks for somebody which can prevent this fraud from happening in some automatic manner. Everybody has smartphones today. Is that possible for some detection which will say, you cannot ask this question or prevent such a question from being asked? The voice back goes and stops it. I'm just giving this as an example. So I'm sure there are solutions, and the students can easily figure it out. They can create a business model out of that. So I'm just giving a very simple cybersecurity. I'm not even talking about people applying these locks on SAP and other ERP systems and bringing the companies down to their knees and asking them to transfer billions of dollars of cryptocurrency, etc. I'm not even going in that direction. That's a field already people are there. I'm going into the simpler field. Just to give you some example. Like one other field is the field of what I call it as predictive analysis, where you take coffee or tea. If somebody can predict what is happening to the markets, you have agents floating around as software, and and predict, hey, the weather this year looks like it's going to be bad in Brazil or in Colombia and other places where the coffee is coming around, and therefore we have an opportunity to increase our coffee prices, per kg or something like that. There are a lot of opportunities for being in the field of prediction, and that requires a lot of data to be crunched. This is not humanly possible, but humans can write the software as AI and be able to work towards that, and these agents can easily be able to represent knowledge in that particular manner. I see a great opportunity similarly for tea and for any commodity. Now, today, India is reaping the benefits of selling wheat to the global market, because Ukraine, which was like the breadbasket of the world, is in war with Russia. So therefore, they are unable to export. India is able to get a massive price increase. So are we able to predict such models, including war? Right? I'm just giving an example. So, I mean, if the exchanges can start doing this, students have an opportunity to create a business model out of this. This is one. The third one I talk is, today people are talking of just autonomous. The framework, what I've heard, which I have seen, which everybody talks about, is called the ACES framework, which is autonomous,
is electric,
shared, and connected.
Connected.
And there are so many elements in that. It looks so easy. Autonomous itself, that Google's company Waymo is, such a rich company because in terms of valuation, because the type of years and years and years of data they have already, done it in the market. So there is a lot of work to be done in that field, just in the ACES framework, right? Autonomous, connected, electric, shared mobility. So it's a huge type of business. And so therefore, what I feel is if our students have their younger children, we should start teaching, which is what we are doing in schools, because that's the need of the hour. That from problem solving, critical thinking, what Gopi was talking about, start learning what is AI, what is data science. I'm not saying to go to this complexity level, but fundamentally to teach. The K-12 school education has to introduce AI, which CBSE and other people have done it, and NEP 2020 is talking about it. So I see that India must do this from a bigger perspective. Is we missed the industrial revolution, and therefore we had, we were under the British rule for over 200 years because we didn't have technology where a few people were able to control us, right? I don't know how many thousand people controlled a huge population of us Indians. If we miss this opportunity of the computer science, AI, data science revolution, we will become slaves to this technology. Today, we saw in Russia, 60% of Russians were using Gmail, and all of a sudden, Google just decided to cut out the Gmail. They're dead, over, history. Now, the whole communication. So, there's a lot of opportunities just for building a strong framework into India. And if you take the good things, I mean, just look at our payment gateways and the UPIs and other things, or even the Aadhaar card. So you can build so much along with the data. Lots of data is available now in India. So I think it's open to students. I mean, whether they are in schools or in colleges or they're in polytechnic. I'm not saying just for engineering. In every aspect of it, the ACES framework you're talking of coffee. I'm just giving some examples. There are thousands of examples. You can use it in nature if you want to save a certain species. And like you can have these camera traps, you can capture data in the night. And you can try to understand what the species is all about, try to understand the interoperability of these species. So I think the scope is really wide. Students must take and say, I'm going to focus on this area and do well. I think, they will do well.
Yeah. Let me just add to that a little bit, George, so that
go ahead.
As latent, the predictive thing that Ramana was talking about, as latent view had done, we had done at least 3 areas that I can point out to you. So one was a food major global firm. We were helping them predict what ingredients they should add to their food chips that they're launching 12 months down the line, right? So for which you needed to, we had our own algorithm. We were able to predict what would take off 18 months down the line, 24 months down the line. We're helping them with that. That's a predictive terming in the food one, which Forbes carried an article about it when we came up with this. Then another example would be driving patterns. So what we found was when we were helping one of the luxury car manufacturers, we found that certain kinds of problems were propping up for certain kinds of driving patterns, certain kinds of drivers, right? So if you drive with that particular pattern, then a specific problem can crop up for you. So we were able to predict that, and therefore the company could proactively address it because they knew this person was going to run into this problem soon. So the company was able to address it. And then the third example I would give is manufacturing that Ramana was mentioning, where if a line stops, then there's millions of dollars wasted by the time you put it back again, right? So we were able to predict when the line was about to stop, and then and we would give that early warning signal to the plant manager, who would, and we were using just different kinds of data, seeing the patterns and saying, hey, this looks like it's going to stop. And then they could go and make sure that the line continues and does not stop, right? Because as soon as the people on the ground know this is happening, they can at least make sure that it doesn't. So we were giving early warning. So here are 3 predictions that, building on what Ramana said, the 3 building predictions, and one in the food industry, one in automobiles, and the other one was in manufacturing. So and these are no different from your recommendation engines that you come out of Netflix or Spotify or something, where you are, if you see these 2, you might like this movie, right? Or if you hear these songs, you might like this song. So those recommendation engines in the digital native companies is very common, but it's still not very common in a manufacturing world. It's not that common in the food industry. It's not yet that common in the automobile one. The ACES is a framework that they're working on. And those are 3 concrete examples that I worked on, so that so it's not just in the air. We've actually done work on this. And the other point is very specific to India, like UPI. India is going to introduce health IDs, right? So for consumers and for hospitals. It was called NDHM, National Digital Health Mission. Now I think it's called Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission or something like that. So there's a new name, but it's been introduced in the Union Territories because of the success of UPI. And what Ramana was mentioning was since 2017, when UPI was introduced, the number of transactions through Google Pay and Phone Pay have been multi-fold compared to all transactions through credit cards ever, right, in India. So the people are just using this very easily. It's just a layer on your existing framework, right? So India is going to introduce something like this in the healthcare space. And this would leapfrog us and make us one of the leading countries in the world if we can execute it. And that will open up a plethora of opportunities for the new generation. The existing players will struggle to catch up with what's going on. But as you come into the workforce, and if you're observing these things happening, you could build $1 billion company if you're one of the first to think of how can this be made use of, right? So this is more to trigger your thoughts on there are multiple areas, but you should be watching out for these disruptions that are happening, and you should jump onto this ahead of everybody else. You might compete with the Geo Health. Reliance might come in, but you can still give Geo a run for its money as they enter, right? So there are multiple opportunities. George, I just wanted to add to what Ramana was saying, because we are in the right place at the right time. Now we can't say there are no opportunities. It's how creative we are in our thinking is what is more important.
So there is a question from the participants, but before that question, probably I would like to just slightly shift gears here. One is like, you talked about, in fact, Ramana and Gopi, both of you gave a lot of places where AI can solve problems like, preventing fraud from scammers, predictive analysis. That's a huge thing, like, shared mobility. And even Gopi, you talked about food industry, and even in the environment space, a lot of things are there, a lot of places where we can solve problems using AI. But if you want to make, probably the future of India are with the students here. And if you want to equip the students here, what are some of the suggestions or advices that you would provide? Because this is not for the students, but this is more for the college and the faculty members that probably who might be here. What could be some of the advices or suggestions that you might want to give the institutions and the faculty members?
I'll let Ramana go. I just spoke for
Thanks. Thanks, Gopi. The thing is that not every college or university can deep dive into every topic. But one big thing which is happening in today's world is, most of these courses are being offered online, some free and some at some nominal charges. Internationally from IITs, you have the NPTEL, and there are so many wonderful courses. So I think my thinking for the students was, this was not an opportunity which we had when we went into IIT. We just learned what the professors taught us in the classroom, and that was it. Maybe read a few books in the library and then talk to your friends, and that was it. But today you can attend courses across the world, Coursera, and you have edX, and then you have each of the IITs and so many NITs, all of them offering these courses. So there are wonderful courses being offered across the field. So I think students must take interest, spend their time whenever they're able to get. You can't expect every college or every university to have an expertise in every field. Because the entire thing is exploding in every direction. So everybody is going to be quite narrow and focused. But if you want to work on something, you get your fundamentals from your college, then you pick up these topics, and I'm sure industry will also help you. To become more, ready for the industry or future ready. I'm sure the industries will also be able to help you do training specific to that industry. So it will be a two-tier thing, and this going on these on the virtual learning platform is the only way I see going the way forward, because there are just far too many things taking place. I don't see just too complex for one college to or even an IIT to offer the breadth and width of the whole curriculum. I'm sure Gopi will have a much deeper view on this coming from directly from the industry. So I think I'll hand it over to him.
So Ramana, what you're saying is the onus is still with the students and
Yes.
probably take the fundamentals from the college, and probably colleges can only do so much is what you're saying. And probably the students should actually take the responsibility of learning from various places and things like that is what you're saying.
Based on their interest, based on their strengths. I mean, the moment they know what their strengths or weaknesses are there, then the opportunities will also, pop up. They should have the passion to learn. And this learning has to be lifelong. Because the next batch of students are coming behind you, and they will, if you don't have the passion, so you have to keep learning. So otherwise, you're going to become obsolete and outdated.
So Gopi, do you have any other different perspective?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the same thing. He's put it very eloquently. So you got to take the initiative. You got to drive this. Faculty will help you if you go reach out to the faculty. And if there are industry connects that can help, then that's something that is very useful. But yeah, I mean, other than that, but there are also, what I see is the Kaggle contests. So there are some global contests that take place, and I've seen people with high level of enthusiasm participating in those contests, and these are open to everybody as long as you have the initiative. Usually they take publicly available data and ask you to create something out of it. So even the first 2 times, let's say we failed miserably participating in those, but you will interact with some fantastic folks when you're there, so that could trigger your thoughts in the right direction. So I think an NPTEL is one of the examples of courses. I think IIT Madras has also come up with a lot of these. Are free, right? So you can actually most of my AI I learned using these online courses, right? So obviously I'm a mechanical student, and I didn't learn any computer science when I was college, and I was Johnson & Johnson and Philips, and lived in 5 different countries doing all sorts of stuff. So when I go to a client, then I've got to read up about their business. I have to learn the technologies, and like Ramana pointed out, so it's and the people who come out of campus now are so smart. Most of the time, I just take the smart people with me for these meetings, because you learn from each other, right? So the industry experience that I bring to the table, and the neural network experience the computer science person brings, we have to make sure that we are very relevant to the problem that needs to be solved. And if you're the first to identify the problem, then you have a better chance of solving it, right? So these are the elements that exist, but 90% of the initiative is with the students. The rest, the fact that you're in SVC, the fact that you have people who are getting the industry to come and talk to you, all these will help you. But the drive and energy of what you want to do should really come from within you, and you got to push yourself and your friends. I mean, it's having a group of close friends working on this really helps.
Excellent. So I have a question from Ajay Saba.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, thanks for the insights, and also he has this question: have you ever witnessed data drifting problem, and how do we overcome that? That's the question. Who would like to take that?
I think it's right in the realm of Gopi.
So can you repeat the question again?
Data drifting. He's talking about data drifting.
Have you ever witnessed data drifting problem, and how do we overcome that?
Got it. No. I'm probably I haven't directly. So the way it's phrased, I'm not familiar with, so I don't want to give a wrong answer to this. But mostly, every time we look at what's given to us as data, it is we spend weeks and months cleaning up the data to get to a point where we feel we can even start applying a model, right? So, so most of our experience has been, as soon as a company gives us data, or we look at something and say, here's the data available, that it takes us weeks and months of spending a lot of time making sure it's cleaned and everything is perfect before I apply any model whatsoever onto it, because it's like garbage in and garbage out. But Ramana, I'm not sure if that's the data drifting, so I'm not familiar with
I'm not familiar. I just know that whenever there is something which is unforeseen, right?
Yeah, okay.
Like a new thing comes up. How do you deal with data? And data drifting is something where, at the end of the day, there statistically it comes down.
It's a black swan kind of an event.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for that,
So I understand. Okay, I'm not really, strong in data science or data analytics, but this is what I understood, and I think students must understand we can't be experts in every field.
Yeah,
So we're quite limited in our own way.
Yeah, so if it's a black swan kind of an event, then it's extremely challenging. So that's where the AI plays a much better role than your traditional linear regression kind of a thing, because the signals that you use to figure this out are not in your mainstream. It's in the periphery, right? So the more signals you add, then you can predict those once in a lifetime kind of the black swan kind of events, like the war breaking out, is extremely challenging for your traditional models to figure out, right? So the more peripheral data that you feed in, the more data that we have seen during previous war times would help come up with some signals as to there's a probability of war is going to be high right now. But in the traditional modeling that we do, it's extremely challenging to capture the black swan kind of event. So Ajay, I'm not even sure if we addressed your question, but in terms of data cleaning and black swan, probably we addressed it. And before the meeting gets over, if I understand what data drifting is, I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Gopi. In fact, we were talking about, Ramna was talking about, we have loads and loads of data, right? And data in the wrong hands also could be so devastating, right? Probably we have Aadhaar cards and things like that. A lot of data is available, across, and I'm sure. So one question I always think is, what can go wrong, in artificial intelligence? Is there anything that can go wrong when we apply artificial intelligence? That's my question. I don't know if it makes sense, but I was just thinking about it.
I can have a shot at it, Ramana, if that's okay.
Oh, sure, please.
So before we go into the data security problem, which is, I think, known problem, right? So I would like to touch upon some basic things that can go wrong with AI, right? So we have had cases where, let's say you're using a camera to do quality assurance for a product that comes out of a manufacturing line. So you have product coming out and you train that algorithm that if something is wrong, it'll identify it. If there's a small gap of 0.01 millimeters, something goes wrong, it'll identify it, right? And out of 1,000 products coming out, though it identified 999 correctly, only one it got wrong. And that one was, the product was in two full pieces, right? So it's not small error, big. So a 10-year-old child would have said that that's wrong, right? Because it's broken. But in the training data that we gave, we had not given that, we hadn't trained that algorithm to catch something so obvious, right? And so out of 1,000, it got 999 correct. Only one it got wrong. But everybody laughed at it when they saw the one that it got wrong. Like, so it didn't appear like artificial intelligence. It looked like real stupidity, right? So everybody was laughing, saying a 10-year-old would have found this. Why couldn't you guys crack the code on that? That's one of the real threats with AI is when we make a mistake, it's not some sophisticated mistake. It's a really embarrassing mistake, and we see this across the field, right? So we developed an algorithm to identify COVID. So it looked at chest X-rays and it was cracking. So all the difficult one, it does really well, but simple ones, which we have not put in the training data, that goes wrong, right? So that's one, and it's very embarrassing because if you're going to public and you're saying we have implemented a sophisticated AI system, and if public gets to see some real stupid error that comes out of it, it's difficult for governments, everybody to satisfy the layman saying this thing works. That's one. The second issue with that is biases. So it's as good as the data that we feed. So if I say we want to recruit talent for the organization, look at the past data and recruit the talent. It could be that in the past, I've recruited for various reasons over the past 30 years, there have been more men in the workforce. And so this, if this algorithm learns from that and that they've been successful, it might, if you don't put in checks in the system, it might just recruit more men moving forward because the data shows, so the diversity could be an issue. So if I'm recruiting in the Netherlands and they've not seen Indian CEOs before, then this algorithm might not throw up Indian CEOs or Indian executives for higher level jobs because it's not seen that in the training data set. So the biases of the past or the training data could get perpetuated by the algorithm if you're not, there's a ethical question mark there. The third problem usually is that one case that went wrong out of 1,000, right? Who's responsible for it? Who takes up the liability for it, right? So if there's a surgeon doing something and if surgeon makes a mistake, then the surgeon takes the responsibility for it. But if there's an AI advising the surgeon and something goes wrong with the patient, so whose fault is it? Is it the surgeon's fault or is it the AI's fault? Or if an autonomous vehicle gets into an accident and there is death, for instance, then who takes responsibility for that, right? So that is again a big issue in the AI space, right? One is when there are errors, they are very obvious errors that it looks silly. And there are biases that get carried, which is all the training data problem. Third one is liability. When there's a problem, who's responsible for it? I'm not even touching upon the mega problem that you brought about of what if someone steals your data or misuses your data for some other purpose. Everybody understands that as a big problem, and the people are working on it. But these are the other problems that AI has. And as of now, we are applying it in places where this doesn't make a difference, right? So if you're ordering a Uber car, that basic decision is made by an algorithm, right? There's no human being involved in making that decision. And that it's not a life or death issue. So you're going to get a car, and who sends that car to which person is an algorithm, and that algorithm works really well. But in a surgical thing, the liability, what happens, who takes the decision, whether this is assistive or whether this is really forcing should the surgeon listen to the AI or not? These are questions that have not yet been resolved, and these are still limitations of AI, which will get addressed over a period of time.
Thank you. In fact, I got disconnected in between, and I lost you for some time. And then we got to really use artificial intelligence to predict this, in terms of when I'm going to get out of these things, So, Ramna, thank you for summarizing. In fact, I couldn't hear many of the things that you said, and by the time I came in, I lost some of the things that you spoke. But then I'm sure that all the participants, all the members heard that. Ramna, do you want to add to some of those things?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is it's a huge field actually. Like ethics is something which must be taught as part and parcel of AI literacy, according to me. Professors or lecturers or assistant professor, whatever it is, it must be there. In our space in the K-12 education, we have AI ethics as part and parcel of the education. So we're trying to sensitize the children about ethics at every aspect of it, because that's very critical. And there are some very simple examples of in the United States. The story is that white male get a lower interest rate as compared to a white female. So there is a gender bias. But then you compare that to a Mexican male and a Mexican female, then you start seeing the interest rate going up. These biases, as what Gopi was talking about, has been built into the banking software. systems, and these are part and parcel of the entire system. Now, is it correct? Is it wrong? A lot of work needs to be done. So ethics is very, very important to be taught as a part and parcel, at whether it is at a college level, school level, I think company level. People must explore ethics. The other aspect is people must also explore both the legal framework along with the company's products, or along with the decision making. I was just talking to my niece. She's a lawyer working for Amazon, and she works with the Alexa team, and she was talking about the type of problems they are facing within the framework of the Indian law. We are not even talking about the law globally. Now, what are all the challenges which can happen? How do you define what the problem is? Now, suppose you're doing facial recognition to open up, let us say, a phone, and the person opts out of it for privacy reasons. Do you still store the data? Do you not store the data? So there are lots and lots of ethical issues. Can you use a child's photograph? Can you not? So, like what are things like Lakshman Rekha you have, right? You shall not cross these. So I think that this ethics is a huge field. I mean, you opened up in each field. I mean, and I don't even know the ABC of ethics, right? So I'm saying it is impossible for any college to be able to expand on all the entire field. So I think it's a great opportunity. Like, where can things go wrong? I think everywhere. And so just wherever you think exists, it can go wrong there. So I think people have to be very sensitive to the work they're doing. This is cutting edge, but it can also do a lot of harm. It can do a lot of harm. And we have to be very, very, very careful. You need to be basically a good human being to I mean, we are almost coming back to, like somebody may say religion or something like that. Unless you're a good human being, you're not going to design a good software. So I think ethics must be inside you already. You must be a good human being. I think this is one of the things, and keep your eyes and ears open to all sorts of problems and take care of it. I see this as a very important aspect of the.
No, I totally, that's the reason why I was talking about, in fact, Gopi was talking about data security by itself is a different thing altogether. I was talking about every field has its good and bad, right? In terms of hacking, you have some people ethical hacking, and there are hackers who do it for bad things. Artificial intelligence, again, you can use it for good and bad as well. In fact, there's a question from one of the students. I mean, the clarity is still not there in terms of, because when you talk about Tesla car, you're talking about, could you talk about the artificial intelligence and Tesla cars? Probably, because when you talk about Tesla car, it could be autonomous driven car, or it could be even an electric driven car, right? In terms of, so one of those things. I mean, I still don't understand the question, but then let's take the autonomous driven car, like, and if you can throw some light on automobiles and how it can, how artificial intelligence can help automobiles, something that you can talk about. Probably, I mean, if that's the question that, Soma is asking. Probably.
Okay. There's one part of Tesla that I can answer, which is fairly exciting, because when there was a use case where there was a hurricane in Florida, right? And one of the big differences between the traditional cars and Tesla is that your Teslas are fully digitally connected. So all information about Tesla is real-time available to Tesla about where you're driving, what it is, and so on. So Tesla knew exactly the company knew how many Teslas were there in the Florida area. And so there's a battery limitation apparently in different models in Tesla. So these guys quickly removed all limitations for all the cars and all the Teslas that were there in the Florida area, so that they could rush out of the hurricane zone very quickly. And they were able to do it instantaneously, and they communicated with all the Tesla cars. And this was seen as a best-in-class practice at that point. This happened a few years ago, but at that time, no no other company, like if I buy another luxury electric vehicle, mostly my data at that point would have been with a dealer, not with a company. Whereas Tesla, when they started, they got all the information directly, right? So therefore, they were able to quickly address that particular concern of their customers in the Florida area. That's one example of. I don't think at that point any other car company could have done that, because these guys were what I call digitally native. That their starting point itself is digitally native, so they were able to do this. Would be an example of how Tesla's used it.
So you're saying there are some benefits are using connected cars, cars that are connected, right?
Yeah.
And they could do that quickly and probably send some kind of a patch to all the cars, and they worked on that. So
immediately, and none of the other car companies would have even known how many of their cars were in Florida, right? They won't even know that, because the dealers would have the relationship. Because of Tesla's new model, they were able to quickly catch this and address it. I mean, of course, there's also a downside to it of they know where you are. So do you like that or don't like that? That's a different story. Yeah.
And one more thing that I've learned about in automobiles is like they actually check your driving pattern. Once you have driving pattern, and based on the driving pattern, you have variable insurance that gets paid. If you are a kind of a rash driver, probably your insurance premium will go up, and if you are kind of a very calm driver, your insurance premium would be lesser. So I think there is something that is being talked about in where you have variable insurance premiums that are being paid as well. But I think artificial intelligence is playing a role there.
Yeah, here's a question of what Ramana was mentioning earlier. So it depends on your legal framework. In certain places, you will not be allowed to do this in a predictive way, right? I mean, so if I have a higher risk of getting diabetes, will I have a higher health insurance? Can you charge me a bigger premium? Just because, so those are ethical questions, right? So so your job as an insurance, I might turn it around and say your job as an insurance person is to take care of me, right? So if you're going to think I'm going to have a higher risk of getting diabetes and charge me a higher premium upfront, so is that fair? Not fair. So those are the ethical parts of it. But it is true that if I look at your genetic data and your lifestyle data, my prediction of your lifestyle diseases will be a lot more accurate than any other. And using AI, I should be able to predict really well in terms of where which way you're going. But it's in your hands to control it and change it. So if I empower you as an individual with this information, saying, hey, if you lead your current life the way you're leading it, there's a high probability in the next 3 to 5 years you're going to end up as a diabetic. Then you could change your lifestyle and make sure that you push that out by another 10 years, right? Another 15 years, or even keep it away for your lifetime by really managing your diet and activity and sleep patterns and stress levels, most important. So it's possible for you to control this, but these are ethical questions of, can you charge me a premium based on what you're predicting about me? As a consumer, I'll take you to court and say, who are you to tell me about this, right? So, and it depends on the league, and every state in the US might have a different law. So you have to be very careful from an ethics perspective and also from a regulatory perspective on where you're applying AI. And your answer might be correct, but I might not take it too kindly when you tell me these things.
Okay, so thank you, Gopi. So let's move to the last question, and it's open to both of you.
I just have only one. I would like to share something with the students. 2017, exactly 5 years ago, I had a chance to attend a conference in the Silicon Valley. Okay. And I heard some very interesting presentations. One was on this ACES framework. And this was done by an executive from General Motors who had just retired. And he was talking about, this is 5 years ago, right? And he was talking about how Waymo, which is the Google's, company doing the autonomous cars, was how it was collecting data. Very exciting. Another speaker was, I think, Dr. Crick, who had cracked the DNA code and how they were using artificial intelligence to be able to make predictions about your health. What will happen in the next just by looking at data. Truly, just absolutely brilliant. But I think the most important thing, what we noted, we were taken on a drive into Tesla's factory. This is also very close in Fremont, and it was truly amazing. And they also showed us how they build the software, and the whole thing is on a huge iPad or a tab sort of a thing where everything is controlled by there. It is exciting. I think one of the people talked about this. There are so many opportunities. Like one of the opportunities which people should look at it is, can you think of the concept of platooning? Where the first vehicle is a master vehicle, like a truck which is moving in highways, and you're able to have the second, third, and fourth vehicle using that aerodynamic, that space where the next vehicle will only consume 25 to 30% lower of the fuel or electricity, whatever the energy requirements, and you're able to do it and be able to transport the huge amount. There are opportunities available across the globe. Where vehicles can, like 90% of the time, if you look at vehicles, they're just stationary. Do we need to invest so much of money in that? Can the vehicle go and earn some money by being an autonomous taxi? The type of questions which are thrown in such a conference, I would like students to start thinking in that direction. Why should a car be parked 90% of the time in your house and you are actually using it for 10%? It doesn't make economic rational. Why can't you use an Uber or an Ola or something like that? Or if you want to buy a car because you want the flexibility, why don't you convert it into an autonomous car and earn some money out of it? So there are opportunities available in various fields. I see that that students must open up their minds to explore these. I see a great field for them. Yeah.
That's good. You opened up our minds. I was thinking my car been lying there for some time now. So, all right. So, in fact, let's come to the last part of it. And thank you for the insight there. I'm sure that a lot of things that the students would have got benefited out of it. Just one thing, like if you have few one or two or three things, probably to give some to the students as a takeaway after this course. After this session, what would that be? Like, what should students take away from this? Like, let me tell you what I have understood. Probably after this discussion. In fact, Gopi was saying garbage in, garbage out. And without data, there is no artificial intelligence. So that is something which strongly came from Gopi. And it is not those sci-fi movies and things like that, where in Transformers and in Terminators where robots speak. That's purely aspirational and not the actual artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is more with respect to data analytics and things like that, predictive analysis. And those are some of the things that I understood. So probably going forward, if there are anything that you would want to say, like what could students take away from this discussion? What would it be? 2 or 3 points, each one of them.
You want me to go?
Anything, Ramna. If you want, I can go first. And then...
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. So when you're looking for opportunities, if you're looking for a role in a company, I would want you to look at whether they are, digitally native companies or not, right? And it's fairly critical because if the core decision making of the company is done by an algorithm, right? Let's say, as an example, the allocation of cars in Uber is done by an algorithm, or recommendation of songs in Spotify is done by an algorithm, or even qualifying borrowers in Ant Financial, some of these new age financial companies, is done by an algorithm. Then I would call them as digitally native, or they're AI ready, right? So So that's where you can really look at enhancing your skills in AI and also making big contributions to organizations. In old economy organizations, when you go there, you have to look for places where you can move the needle there. And you should not end up doing AI just chatbots and feel happy with yourself that you've done a great chatbot, because you need to make sure when you're going into an organization as an AI expert or as an AI practitioner, that you have an opportunity to make an impact on that organization. Look for that when you pick up your roles, or if you don't find it, start your own company, or join hands with other folks, other startups to move the needle. So make a big impact using AI, and don't just do peripheral things with it. And when you make an impact, there'll be ethical questions that you need to watch out for, and the legal frameworks that you need to watch out for. But make a big impact in the organizations that you get into. That would be my biggest message for you.
Thank you, Gopi. Over to Ramana.
Yeah, so I go back to the fact that everybody has come here today because they want to be an AI or a data science practitioner, whatever way. So I will add again, please learn the fundamentals of computer science. Second is, I said you should be passionate about whatever you're doing. Do it with passion. You'll see results coming automatically. Be a lifelong learner. Keep learning. Do not stop learning, because that way you can easily keep abreast of what is happening in technology. Because technology will change. People like me will become irrelevant in a couple of years because things would have changed so fast. So and I think everybody should become a lifelong learner. And the last is be an ethical human being, because you will come across situations and things in your life, when you will have to take critical software decisions which may affect lives, or or it may increase the price to somebody. At that time, when you come to that critical crossroad, be a good human being. I think you'll have people telling you not to do these things. It's a tough call. You will have to be. I think being an ethical human being is going to be a tough issue, but I think that's very important, is what I feel.
So thank you. We've come to the end of this panel discussion, and I would like to thank Ramana Prasad and Gopi Kotishwaran for their valuable kind of discussion insights and a lot of examples and experience, because you shared your experiences as well, and I'm sure that it would have benefited all the students who are gathered here. So thank you very much, and I hope to meet you in some other discussions. And so thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ramana. Thanks, George.
Thank you.
On behalf of
I would like to request William to give us a feedback from the students on how we did. Was it useful? Did they find it? I think if you can do a survey and give it to us, this will help us to improve ourselves next time when we get a chance. So we would love to, if Siki can do this, it will be great for us. And I would like to say congratulations to all the students for attending today's talk. I think Gopi and you have, George, have done a great job. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. On behalf of Siki and Sri Venkateshwara College of Engineering, I'd like to thank all the participants, and especially Mr. George Koshi, Mr. Gopi Kotishwaran, and Mr. Ramana Prasad for actively sharing your insights. We would be sharing the video link to you, as well as suggested, we'll be also sharing a form. You can give your suggestion in it so that we can go further. And this is the second session that we have done, and we have coming the 4 more sessions that we'll be doing in coming months. I request all the participants to join and be benefited through this. And also for further events, if you want to know about Siki's events, you can go into our website sicci.in, and you can keep following us for further events in it. Again, thank you all for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.